Leave him at the altar and walk out alone. Those words slithered into my ear as I stared at my reflection in full bridal white. I spun around, heart hammering. A woman I'd never seen before stood behind me, elegant, calm, and wearing an expression that turned my blood cold. "Go home now," she whispered, "and you'll see what I mean." "What are you talking about?" My voice barely escaped my throat, but before I could grab her arm, she melted back into the sea of wedding staff and vanished like smoke. The consultant touched my elbow. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just cold feet." But it wasn't cold feet. It was dread. I told no one. Not my bridesmaids, not my mother, not my fiancé, Marcus. I convinced myself it was nothing. A cruel joke, a stressed mind, last-minute panic. But those words stuck to my ribs like poison. "Go home now and you'll understand." That night, instead of joining Marcus for our planned dinner, I drove to our house alone. The sky bled orange and red. Each mile tightened a noose around my chest. The house sat dark when I arrived. Too quiet, too still. My hands shook as I turned the key. The air inside felt wrong, heavy, like someone had just left the room. Then I heard it. A soft sound, a breath, a laugh. And when I stepped further into the hallway, I froze solid. The sound came again. A woman's laugh, low and breathy, from upstairs. I couldn't move. My pulse roared so loud I thought my ribs would crack. Every muscle screamed run, but my feet wouldn't obey. Then, slowly, silently, I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The house smelled of Marcus's cologne, warm, familiar, now suffocating. Another noise drifted down. A whisper. Low. Intimate. My stomach turned inside out. Each step toward the staircase felt like wading through cement. My heels clicked on the marble. I slipped them off, gripping them like weapons. Barefoot, I climbed. 1 step. 2. 3. The voices grew clearer with every inch. A woman's giggle, then Marcus's voice, gentle, amused, unmistakable. "I've been waiting for this," he murmured. My throat closed. The bedroom door stood slightly open. A blade of golden light cutting across the dark hallway like an invitation to disaster. My fingers trembled as I pushed it open. And then my world exploded. The truth doesn't knock, it walks right in. There he was, Marcus, by the bed, and wrapped in his arms, a woman in nothing but white lace, lace that matched my wedding dress. Then she turned to face me, and my blood turned to ice. It was the same woman from the boutique. She stood there, draped in white, lips curved like she'd been expecting me all along. Marcus spun at the sound of the door. When his eyes met mine, his face went gray. "Emma," he whispered. Silence. Thick. Heavy, drowning. I couldn't speak. My fingers curled at my sides as the truth settled over me like frost. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. You, I breathed. You warned me. The woman tilted her head, calm as still water. I told you to come home early. Marcus stepped forward, panic flickering in his eyes. Emma, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Explain? A bitter laugh tore from my throat. Explain how my fiancé is in our bedroom with another woman the night before our wedding? His silence was the only answer I needed. My heart cracked, but underneath the pain, something colder rose up. Clarity. Pain is a mirror. Look into it and see the truth. How long? I asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. Answer me. A few months, he said, voice barely a whisper. Each word a knife. And who is she? Before Marcus could speak, the woman met my gaze, steady and unashamed. My name is Veronica, she said. and I'm not just his lover. She took one slow step forward. I'm his wife. The floor dropped out from under me. The truth echoed through the room like a gunshot. I married Marcus 3 years ago, and in that instant, I understood that the wedding I'd been planning was never supposed to be mine. I'm his wife. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The walls pressed in. My eyes locked onto Marcus, pleading silently for him to deny it. He didn't, he just dropped his gaze. I was going to tell you, he muttered weakly. When? My voice shook. After the honeymoon, or after you emptied my accounts? Silence answered. Veronica folded her arms. Her expression wasn't cruel, just certain. I didn't know about you at first, she said. But when I learned he was planning another wedding, I couldn't stay quiet. I stared at her, fury and disbelief warring in my chest. So you warned me. She nodded. You deserved the truth. Then the final blow. The dress, the venue, the deposits, all paid with your money. I turned slowly toward Marcus. You used me. His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? He hesitated, and in that pause the truth became more brutal than any confession. You were convenient, he admitted. Something inside me shattered, then turned to stone. The tears stopped, the shaking stopped. The girl who dreamed of fairy tales died right there. In her place stood a woman who understood betrayal. I pulled off my engagement ring and set it on the dresser. The wedding is canceled, I said, voice cold as steel. Then I looked him dead in the eye. And this is only the beginning. By the time I walked out, the night air felt sharper than ever before. But I wasn't broken. I was awake. The pain still burned, but beneath it, something sharper took shape. Clarity. Marcus hadn't just broken my heart. He'd tried to steal my future. And he'd underestimated the woman he thought he could fool. I drove straight to my apartment, still in my wedding dress. Carefully, I unzipped it and placed it back in its box, not as a memory of love, but as evidence. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. Receipts, contracts, bank transfers. Every wedding payment stared back at me from the screen. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the honeymoon, all from my savings, all in my name. Marcus had planned everything carefully, assuming I'd never question him. But trust leaves tracks, and so does greed. The next morning, I met Veronica at a quiet cafe. She slid a folder across the table. Documents, messages, financial records Marcus had tried to bury. We finished this together, she said firmly. I met her gaze. Yes, I replied. We do. Because Marcus hadn't just lied, he'd committed fraud. And I was going to make sure he paid for every word. The evidence was airtight. Bank statements, contracts, screenshots, voicemails. Every lie Marcus told was now preserved in black and white. Veronica and I sat across from Sarah Kim, one of the sharpest attorneys in the city. She reviewed everything. Her expression calm but focused. When she looked up, there was certainty in her eyes. This isn't just betrayal, she said. It's fraud, financial deception, and bigamy. Marcus isn't just unfaithful, he's a criminal. And the wedding? I asked quietly. Sarah slid the contracts toward me. Every payment came from your accounts. Legally, he has no claim. You're entitled to full restitution and damages. For the first time since that night, I felt something solid settle inside me. Control. Within days, legal notices were filed. The venue canceled his access. His accounts were frozen. His company opened an internal investigation after receiving an anonymous tip, one backed by undeniable proof. The man who once swaggered with confidence was now scrambling. Then the call came. Emma, please. Marcus's voice pleaded through the phone. We can fix this. Just talk to me. I let the silence stretch. There's nothing to fix, I replied coolly. Only consequences. He exhaled, shaky. What do you want? I smiled faintly. The truth. In court. As I ended the call, I realized something profound. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. And justice was finally close. The courtroom was silent. Every whisper died as Marcus stepped forward, his confidence replaced by fear. Gone was the charming man who once promised me forever. In his place stood someone exposed, desperate, cornered. I watched from my seat, calm and composed. This time, I wasn't the victim. I was the truth he couldn't escape. Veronica sat beside me, steady and resolute. Across the aisle, Marcus avoided our eyes, his fingers trembling as he adjusted his tie. Sarah rose gracefully. Your Honor, she began, voice clear and precise. The evidence before this court proves a deliberate pattern of deception, fraud, and bigamy. Documents were presented. Financial records, messages, contracts, legal certificates. Each one dismantled Marcus's lies piece by piece. The judge reviewed everything carefully. The tension was suffocating. Finally, Marcus was called to testify. His voice cracked under oath. I never meant for it to go this far. Sarah's gaze stayed steady. You planned a wedding funded entirely by my client, while legally married to another woman. Is that correct? Marcus hesitated. Answer the question. Yes, he whispered. The truth landed like a gavel strike. Moments later, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds the defendant liable for fraud and financial deception. A wave of relief washed over me. Marcus's empire collapsed in a single breath, and as I watched him stand defeated, I realized this wasn't revenge, it was justice. The courtroom doors closed behind me with quiet finality. It was over. Not with a shout or a triumphant smile, but with a calm, steady peace. Marcus had lost everything. His reputation, his freedom, his carefully constructed illusion. Justice had spoken. And for the first time since that night, I could finally breathe. Veronica stood beside me on the courthouse steps. We exchanged a knowing glance. Two women once deceived, now united by truth. Thank you, she said softly. No, I replied with a gentle smile. We saved each other. We parted ways, not as victims, but as survivors. Weeks later, life felt lighter. The refunds processed, the accounts restored, the chaos replaced by clarity. I donated my wedding decor to a charity that organized ceremonies for couples who couldn't afford them. Watching another bride walk down the aisle in happiness felt like closing a chapter with grace, not bitterness. The dress, however, remained. One quiet evening, I stood before the mirror, wearing it once more. But this time, it wasn't for Marcus. It wasn't for revenge or regret. It was for me. I smiled at my reflection. Stronger, wiser, unbroken. Then I removed the veil, folded the gown carefully, and placed it back in its box, not as a relic of betrayal, but as a symbol of survival. If this story hit home, hit like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more stories that stay with you. Because I didn't lose a wedding. I reclaimed my life. And this time, the future I walk toward is entirely my own.